He didn't know what was about to happen when he helped that struggling mother load her groceries. The rain was coming down hard that evening. Most people rushed past, heads down, focused on getting to their cars. But something made him stop. She was there in the parking lot, wrestling with overflowing bags while a baby cried in the shopping cart. Her clothes were soaked. Her hands were shaking. One bag had already split open, cans rolling across the wet pavement. What would you have done? Most people kept walking. They had their own problems, their own rushing lives. But David couldn't move past her. Something in her eyes, that mixture of exhaustion and determination, reminded him of his own mother, years ago, when times were hard. "Let me help you," he said, already bending down to gather the scattered groceries. She looked up, surprised. In that corporate parking lot, where executives drove past in their luxury cars, no one ever stopped. No one ever noticed the invisible people, the ones who cleaned the offices, who worked the late shifts, who struggled just to make ends meet. But David noticed. He always noticed. You see, David wasn't an executive. He was just a data analyst, on the third floor, barely making enough to cover his own bills. His suit was 5 years old, carefully mended where it had torn. His shoes had been resoled twice. He knew what it meant to count every penny, to wonder if you'd make it to the next paycheck. That's why he couldn't walk past her. That's why he had to stop. "You don't have to," she said, but her voice cracked with relief. "I want to," David replied, already loading bags into her old sedan. The car was held together with duct tape and hope, much like his own life. But he didn't mention that. He just kept loading, kept helping, kept being the person he wished someone had been for his mother all those years ago. 10 minutes. That's all it took. 10 minutes to change 2 lives forever. As he closed her trunk, she turned to him with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have no idea what this means." He smiled, rain still streaming down his face. "We all need help sometimes." Then she drove away, and he thought that was the end of it. Just another small act of kindness in a world that often forgot what kindness looked like. He went home to his studio apartment, heated up leftover soup, and never thought about it again. But sometimes the universe has other plans. Sometimes the smallest acts echo in ways we never imagine. Monday morning came like it always did. Too early, too demanding, too full of deadlines and meetings that seemed to blur together. David sat at his desk, surrounded by spreadsheets and reports, lost in the endless rhythm of corporate life. The third floor was quiet except for the hum of computers and the occasional murmur of conversation. This was his world, predictable, stable, unremarkable, or so he thought. The email came at 9:47 a.m. All staff meeting mandatory 10 a.m. Main auditorium. These emails usually meant one thing: layoffs. David's stomach tightened. He'd survived 3 rounds of cuts in the past 2 years, but each time felt like borrowed time. Have you ever felt that fear? That cold grip of uncertainty when you realize your stability might be an illusion? David joined the stream of employees filing into the auditorium. The atmosphere was tense, electric with anxiety. People whispered theories, shared worried glances, clutched their coffee cups like lifelines. Then the lights dimmed, and she walked onto the stage. David's breath caught in his throat. It couldn't be. But it was. The woman from the parking lot stood at the podium, but she looked different now. Instead of rain-soaked clothes, she wore a pristine business suit. Instead of scattered groceries, she held the attention of 800 employees. Instead of exhaustion, her eyes blazed with purpose. "Good morning," she said, her voice carrying across the silent auditorium. "For those who don't know me, I'm Sarah Chen, your new CEO." The room erupted in surprised murmurs. The company had been searching for a new leader for months. Rumors had circulated about bringing in someone from outside, someone who could transform their struggling organization. But no one had expected this. David sank lower in his seat, his mind racing. The woman he'd helped load groceries was the CEO? How was that possible? Sarah continued, her voice steady and strong. I know you're all wondering why I called this meeting. Some of you are probably fearing the worst. But I'm not here to talk about layoffs or budget cuts. I'm here to talk about something far more important. She paused, scanning the crowd, and for one heart-stopping moment, David could have sworn her eyes found his. I'm here to talk about the soul of this company, about who we are, and more importantly, who we could be. The auditorium fell completely silent. Even the skeptics leaned forward. 3 days ago, Sarah said, I experienced something that changed my entire perspective on this organization. Something that showed me we have something here that no competitor can match, no strategy can replicate, no amount of money can buy. David's hands started to sweat. This couldn't be about him. It couldn't be. 3 days ago, in the parking lot of this very building during one of the worst storms we've had all year, I learned what kind of people work here. Not from resumes or performance reviews, but from a simple act of human kindness. Sarah's words hung in the air like a challenge to everything the corporate world had taught them. This person didn't just offer to help, she continued. He insisted on it. He loaded every single bag into my car while the rain soaked through his clothes. He didn't ask for my name, didn't try to network, didn't even mention where he worked. He just helped, smiled, and told me that we all need help sometimes. David could feel his co-workers starting to look around, wondering who this mystery person was. His face burned, but he kept his eyes fixed on his lap. I sat in my car afterward and cried, Sarah admitted. Not because I was sad, but because I realized something profound. If this company has even one employee capable of that kind of authentic kindness, then we have something worth fighting for, something worth building on. How often do we underestimate the power of our smallest actions? I've been in corporate leadership for 20 years, Sarah continued. I've turned around 3 major companies, implemented countless strategies, analyzed endless data. But in all that time, I've learned one truth that matters more than all the rest. Companies aren't built on strategies or products or market positions. They're built on people, and the character of those people determines the character of the company. She clicked a button, and a slide appeared behind her. It wasn't a graph or a chart. It was a simple quote. The true measure of any organization is how its people treat each other when no one is watching. That's why I'm here today, Sarah said. Not to announce layoffs, but to announce a transformation. We're going to build something different here. Something that starts with recognizing and nurturing the humanity that already exists within these walls. The room stirred with cautious optimism. This wasn't the speech they'd expected. Effective immediately. We're implementing what I call the Kindness Initiative. It's not a program or a policy. It's a fundamental shift in how we operate. We're going to create an environment where the kind of person who stops to help a stranger in the rain doesn't just survive. They thrive. Where compassion isn't seen as weakness, but as the ultimate strength. David's head was spinning. This couldn't be real. CEOs didn't talk like this. The corporate world didn't work like this. But Sarah wasn't finished. I want to find that person who helped me, she said, her eyes scanning the crowd again. Not to single them out or embarrass them, but to thank them. To show them, and all of you, that this is the kind of behavior we're going to celebrate, reward, and build our future on. The auditorium buzzed with whispers. People were already trying to figure out who it might be. But here's the thing, Sarah continued, raising her hand for silence. I don't want just one hero. I want 800. I want every single person in this company to know that their actions matter. That kindness isn't just nice. It's necessary. That helping each other isn't just good karma, it's good business. The meeting ended with thunderous applause, but David slipped out quickly, his mind reeling. He wasn't ready for this. He'd never wanted recognition. The whole point of kindness was that you did it without expecting anything in return. Now he felt exposed, like his simple act had been turned into something bigger than he'd ever intended. Back at his desk, he tried to focus on his spreadsheets, but the numbers blurred together. His colleagues were buzzing with excitement, discussing Sarah's speech, speculating about the identity of the parking lot hero. Bet it was someone from marketing, Jennifer from accounting said. They're always trying to make good impressions. Nah, probably someone from sales, Mark countered. They know how to work every angle. David kept his head down, fingers flying across his keyboard, pretending to be absorbed in his work. But inside, his thoughts churned like a storm. What if they found out it was him? What if they thought he'd done it to gain favor? What if this changed everything? You know that feeling when a secret burns inside you, not because it's shameful, but because it's precious. That's how David felt. His act of kindness had been pure, untainted by ambition or calculation. Now it felt like it was being dissected, analyzed, turned into something corporate. His phone buzzed. An email from HR. All staff survey, share your stories of workplace kindness. David stared at it, his cursor hovering over the delete button, but something made him pause. He thought about Sarah's words, about building a different kind of company. Maybe she really meant it. Maybe this wasn't just corporate theater. The afternoon brought more emails, more initiatives, more buzz about the coming changes. David watched it all from his quiet corner of the third floor, wondering if real change was possible, or if this was just another corporate fairy tale that would fade with the next quarterly report. Then, at 4:47 p.m., everything changed again. His desk phone rang. The one that hardly ever rang unless there was a problem with one of his reports. The caller ID showed an extension he didn't recognize. David Chen? The voice asked when he answered. Yes? This is Sarah Chen's assistant. The CEO would like to see you in her office. Would now be convenient? David's heart stopped. Chen. They shared the same last name. He'd noticed it during the meeting, but hadn't thought much of it. Chen was a common name. But now, being summoned to her office. Mr. Chen, are you there? Yes, David managed. I'll be right up. He stood on shaky legs, straightened his old suit, and headed for the elevator. His colleagues barely noticed him leave. David had always been invisible, and he'd preferred it that way. But as the elevator climbed toward the executive floor, David realized that some things couldn't stay hidden forever. Some truths demanded to be told. Some connections insisted on being made. The elevator dinged, the doors opened, and David stepped out into a future he'd never imagined. The meeting ended with thunderous applause, but David slipped out quickly, his mind reeling. He wasn't ready for this. He'd never wanted recognition. The whole point of kindness was that you did it without expecting anything in return. Now he felt exposed, like his simple act had been turned into something bigger than he'd ever intended. Back at his desk, he tried to focus on his spreadsheets, but the numbers blurred together. His colleagues were buzzing with excitement, discussing Sarah's speech, speculating about the identity of the parking lot hero. Bet it was someone from marketing, Jennifer from accounting said. They're always trying to make good impressions. Nah, probably someone from sales, Mark countered. They know how to work every angle. David kept his head down, fingers flying across his keyboard, pretending to be absorbed in his work. But inside, his thoughts churned like a storm. What if they found out it was him? What if they thought he'd done it to gain favor? What if this changed everything? You know that feeling when a secret burns inside you, not because it's shameful, but because it's precious. That's how David felt. His act of kindness had been pure, untainted by ambition or calculation. Now it felt like it was being dissected, analyzed, turned into something corporate. His phone buzzed. An email from HR. All staff survey, share your stories of workplace kindness. David stared at it, his cursor hovering over the delete button, but something made him pause. He thought about Sarah's words, about building a different kind of company. Maybe she really meant it. Maybe this wasn't just corporate theater. The afternoon brought more emails, more initiatives, more buzz about the coming changes. David watched it all from his quiet corner of the third floor, wondering if real change was possible, or if this was just another corporate fairy tale that would fade with the next quarterly report. Then, at 4:47 p.m., everything changed again. His desk phone rang. The one that hardly ever rang unless there was a problem with one of his reports. The caller ID showed an extension he didn't recognize. "David Chen?" the voice asked when he answered. "Yes? This is Sarah Chen's assistant. The CEO would like to see you in her office. Would now be convenient?" David's heart stopped. Chen. They shared the same last name. He'd noticed it during the meeting, but hadn't thought much of it. Chen was a common name. But now, being summoned to her office. "Mr. Chen, are you there?" "Yes," David managed. "I'll be right up." He stood on shaky legs, straightened his old suit, and headed for the elevator. His colleagues barely noticed him leave. David had always been invisible, and he'd preferred it that way. But as the elevator climbed toward the executive floor, David realized that some things couldn't stay hidden forever. Some truths demanded to be told. Some connections insisted on being made. The elevator dinged, the doors opened, and David stepped out into a future he'd never imagined. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was full of understanding, full of recognition, full of shared humanity. "My mother," Sarah said finally, "is dying." The words fell, between them like stones in still water, creating ripples that would spread far beyond this room. "That night you helped me. I'd just come from the hospital. The doctors had told us the chemotherapy wasn't working, that we needed to start thinking about arrangements." Her voice broke slightly on the last word. "I'm so sorry," David said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. "I sat in that hospital room," Sarah continued, holding my mother's hand, thinking about all the times she'd sacrificed for me, all the nights she'd gone hungry so I could eat, all the opportunities she'd passed up so I could have them instead. And I realized I'd spent so much time climbing the corporate ladder that I'd forgotten the most important lesson she ever taught me. "What was that?" David asked softly. Sarah looked at him with tears in her eyes. "That success means nothing if you lose your soul getting there. That power is only valuable if you use it to lift others up. That at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is how we treat each other." She stood, walking back to the window. "That's why I took this job, David. Not for the salary or the prestige or the challenge. I took it because I saw a company that had lost its way just like I had. A company that had forgotten that its greatest asset isn't its products or its profits, it's its people." "But here's the thing," Sarah said, turning back to him. "I can't do this alone. I can give speeches and implement initiatives and restructure departments, but real change, that comes from people like you. People who don't need a policy to tell them to be kind. People who understand that helping others isn't a strategy, it's a way of life." David shifted uncomfortably. "I'm just a data analyst, Ms. Chen. I don't have any special skills or influence." "That's where you're wrong," Sarah said. "Do you know what I've learned in my 20 years of leadership? The people who change organizations aren't usually the ones with the biggest titles or the loudest voices. They're the ones who show up every day and quietly do the right thing. They're the ones who create ripples of kindness that eventually become waves of change." She pulled out a folder from her desk. David recognized it as an employee file, his employee file. 5 years with the company, Sarah read. Consistently excellent performance reviews. Never missed a deadline. Never asked for a promotion. Never complained about the 2% raises while executives got bonuses worth more than your annual salary. David's cheeks burned. "I don't need much. The job is stable. That's enough." "Is it?" Sarah challenged. "Or have you just accepted that this is all you deserve?" The question hit David like a physical blow. How many times had he told himself to be grateful for what he had? How many opportunities had he let pass because he didn't want to seem greedy or ambitious? "Your manager says you've redesigned half the reporting systems in your department," Sarah continued. "Made them more efficient, more accurate, more useful. But you've never taken credit. You've never asked for recognition. Why?" David thought about his mother again, about her quiet strength, her humble service. "Because that's not why I do it. I do it because it needs to be done, because it helps people do their jobs better, because it's the right thing to do." Sarah smiled, a real smile, not the practiced one from the auditorium. And that's exactly why I need you. She stood, walking over to a whiteboard covered with organizational charts and strategic plans. I'm not just looking to change policies, David. I'm looking to change hearts, to create a culture where people like you don't just survive, they lead. Where kindness isn't seen as weakness, but as the ultimate qualification for leadership. I don't understand, David said. What are you asking me to do? Sarah turned to face him. I'm creating a new position. Chief Kindness Officer. Someone who will help me identify and nurture the humanity that already exists in this company. Someone who will help design programs that reward compassion, not just competition. Someone who understands that the smallest acts can have the biggest impact. David's world tilted. You want me to, but I'm not qualified for that. I don't have an MBA. I don't have leadership experience. I don't even have a decent suit. You helped. A stranger in the rain, Sarah said simply, without knowing who she was, without expecting anything in return, without even leaving your name. That's the only qualification I need. Have you ever stood at the edge of a life-changing moment, terrified to take the leap? That's where David stood now, suspended between the safe, small life he'd built and the vast unknown Sarah was offering. Every practical part of his brain screamed that this was impossible. Data analysts didn't become C-suite executives. People like him didn't get opportunities like this. But then he thought about his mother, working her fingers to frostbite to provide for him. He thought about all the invisible people in the company, doing good work in quiet corners, never recognized, never rewarded. He thought about what could happen if kindness actually became a core value, not just a nice word in a mission statement. I need to think about it, David said finally. Of course, Sarah replied. Take all the time you need. But, David, while you're thinking, remember this. Every great change in history started with someone saying yes to an opportunity they didn't feel ready for. Someone deciding that maybe, just maybe, the world could be different. That night, David sat in his studio apartment staring at Sarah's business card. The rain had stopped, but the city lights blurred through his window, creating a kaleidoscope of possibility and doubt. His laptop sat open on the coffee table, displaying the same spreadsheet he'd been working on for 3 days. But the numbers might as well have been hieroglyphics for all the sense they made now. He called his mother. How was your day, honey? She asked. Her voice warmed despite the late hour. Mom, David said. What would you do if someone offered you a chance to change everything, but you didn't think you were ready? There was a pause. His mother had always been good at hearing what he wasn't saying. Is this about a girl? She asked. Hopefully. Despite everything, David laughed. No, Mom, it's about work, about an opportunity. Ah, she said. Let me guess, you don't think you deserve it? How did she always know? I've watched you your whole life, David, she continued. Always putting others first. Always working twice as hard for half the recognition. Always afraid that wanting more somehow makes you greedy. You taught me to be grateful, David protested. To work hard and not complain. I taught you to be kind, his mother corrected. But I never taught you to be small. There's a difference between humility and hiding your light, son. David closed his eyes, feeling the weight of years of making himself invisible. What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? Then you'll learn and try again, his mother said, simply. But David, what if you succeed? What if you're exactly what they need? After they hung up, David walked to his window, looking out at the city below. Somewhere out there were thousands of employees who would come to work tomorrow, hoping things might be different, hoping someone might notice their efforts, their struggles, their humanity. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. This is Sarah. I'm sorry for texting so late, but I wanted you to know something. After you left, I called my mother, told her about you, about what you did. She said to tell you that kindness like yours is exactly what the world needs more of. She said to tell you not to be afraid of your own light. David stared at the message, tears blurring his vision. 2 mothers, connected by their children's chance encounter, both saying the same thing. Don't be afraid to shine. At midnight, David made his decision. He picked up Sarah's card and dialed the number. I knew you'd call tonight, Sarah said instead of hello. How? Because people like us don't sleep when the world is offering us a chance to make a difference. The next morning came wrapped in golden sunlight, as if the universe itself was celebrating David's decision. David. Perfect timing. Coffee? Sarah asked when he arrived at her office. Please, he said, grateful for something to do with his hands. She poured 2 cups from a simple coffee maker. I need you to understand something before we start. This isn't going to be easy. There will be people who think we're crazy, people who'll say kindness has no place in business, people who'll fight us every step of the way. I know, David said. I've been thinking about it all night. And I keep coming back to one question. If not us, who? If not now, when? Sarah's face lit up. Exactly. That's exactly it. So let me show you what I'm thinking. She turned to the whiteboard where she'd mapped out a vision that took David's breath away. It wasn't just about feel-good initiatives or token gestures. It was a complete reimagining of how a corporation could operate. Kindness in hiring practices, she explained. Looking for emotional intelligence, not just technical skills. Kindness in performance reviews, rewarding collaboration over competition. Kindness in customer service, empowering employees to actually help people, not just follow scripts. David studied the board, his analytical mind already seeing the connections, the possibilities, the challenges. What about the shareholders? Won't they object to anything that might impact profits? Sarah smiled. That's the beautiful part. I've run the numbers. Companies that prioritize employee well-being and customer satisfaction consistently outperform their competitors in the long run. Kindness isn't just good ethics, it's good business. We just need to prove it. She handed him a folder thick with research, case studies, and projections. I've been working on this for years, waiting for the right company, the right moment, the right team. Finding you in that parking lot, it was like the universe saying, now. David flipped through the pages, his excitement growing. This wasn't some fuzzy idealism. This was a strategic, data-driven approach to creating a more humane corporate culture. Where do we start? He asked. With stories, Sarah said. I want to find every David in this company, every person who's been quietly doing the right thing, every act of kindness that's gone unnoticed. We're going to celebrate them, learn from them, and build on them. They spent the next 3 hours planning, debating, dreaming. David forgot to be nervous, forgot to doubt himself. This felt right in a way nothing in his career ever had. There's one more thing, Sarah said as their meeting wound down. Your salary. Sarah named a figure that made his eyes widen. It was more than he'd ever imagined earning. That's generous, he managed. No, Sarah corrected. That's fair. That's what happens when we value people properly. Word spread through the company like wildfire. David Chen, the quiet data analyst from the 3rd floor, was now Chief Kindness Officer. Kindness Officer? Mark from sales scoffed in the break room. What's next, a Chief Happiness Unicorn? But Jennifer from accounting pulled David aside later. My daughter has special needs, she whispered. I've been hiding it for years, afraid it would impact my career. Is this real? Are things really going to change? That's when David understood the true weight of his new role. He wasn't just implementing policies, he was carrying the hopes of everyone who'd ever felt unseen, unvalued, or afraid to bring their whole selves to work. His first official act was to set up a simple suggestion box, not digital, but physical, old-fashioned, and anonymous. Within 2 days, it was overflowing. My wife has cancer. I've been using vacation days for her treatments because I'm afraid to ask for help. I've been sleeping in my car for 2 months, too ashamed to tell anyone I lost my apartment. The janitor, on the 2nd floor, bought my lunch every day last month when he noticed I wasn't eating. No one knows his name. David read each note with Sarah, both of them often fighting back tears. These weren't just employees. These were human beings carrying invisible burdens, performing secret kindnesses, struggling in silence. The first all-hands kindness meeting was scheduled for Friday. David spent the week preparing, visiting each department, listening more than talking. He learned that Maria in IT had been tutoring colleagues' kids in math after hours for free, that Robert in maintenance had a PhD but took the janitor job to support his disabled brother, that the security team had quietly created a fund to help employees in crisis. Friday arrived with a mixture of anticipation and dread. The auditorium was packed, the atmosphere electric with curiosity. David stood backstage, his hands shaking slightly. "You've got this," Sarah whispered. "Remember, you're not trying to convince them of something new. You're helping them see what's already there." David walked onto the stage, no PowerPoint, no grand presentation, just him, his truth, and a microphone. 3 weeks ago, he began, his voice steadier than he felt. "I helped someone load groceries in the rain. I didn't know she was our new CEO. She didn't know I worked here. It was just two human beings, one helping the other." The room was silent, hanging on every word. "Since then, I've discovered something amazing. That moment in the parking lot, it happens here every single day. In 1,000 different ways, you're already taking care of each other. You're already choosing kindness. You're already proving that this is more than just a company. It's a community." David pulled out the first note from the suggestion box. Someone wrote, "The janitor on the second floor bought my lunch every day last month when he noticed I wasn't eating. No one knows his name." He smiled. "His name is Robert. He has a PhD in philosophy. He's been saving for 3 years to bring his brother here from the Philippines for better medical care. And yes, he's been buying lunch for anyone he notices is struggling, out of his own minimum wage salary." Gasps rippled through the audience. David saw Robert in the back row, tears streaming down his face. "Robert," David said, "would you please stand up?" Reluctantly, Robert stood. The applause started slowly, then built to thunder. People were crying, cheering, recognizing not just Robert, but what he represented, the quiet heroes among them. "This is what we're building on," David continued. "Not some corporate initiative imposed from above, but the kindness that's already here. We're just going to support it, celebrate it, and make it safe for everyone to show up as their full, caring selves." He announced the first concrete changes: emergency fund for employees in crisis, paid leave for family caregivers, recognition programs for acts of kindness, mentorship programs pairing struggling employees with those who'd overcome similar challenges. "But here's the most important part," David said. "None of this works if we see it as separate from our real work. Kindness isn't a side project. It's the foundation of everything else. It's how we treat customers, how we develop products, how we make decisions." The questions came fast and fierce. Some skeptical, some hopeful, all real. "What about the quarterly targets?" "We'll meet them by creating an environment where people want to give their best, not just their minimum." "What about the shareholders?" "They'll benefit from a company with lower turnover, higher innovation, and deeper customer loyalty." "What about the people who take advantage?" David paused at this one. "There will always be people who take advantage. But we can't let the fear of the few stop us from supporting the many. We can't build our culture around the worst of us. We build it around the best. And we trust that the best will prevail." As the meeting ended, something had shifted. The skepticism was still there, but it was mixed with something else now. Hope. Real, tangible hope that work could be different. That success didn't require sacrificing your soul. That kindness could be a strategy, not just a sentiment. 6 months later, the quarterly numbers were in. Revenue up 12%. Employee satisfaction up 34%. Customer retention up 28%. Turnover down 45%. The numbers told a story that even the skeptics couldn't ignore. Kindness wasn't just good for the soul. It was good for the bottom line. 5 years later, David stood in the same parking lot where it all began. The rain was falling again, a gentle echo of that night that changed everything. The company had not only survived, but had exceeded every growth target. More importantly, it had sparked a movement that spread far beyond their walls. The Kindness Business Alliance now included over 200 companies committed to putting humanity at the center of their operations. Business schools taught case studies on the Chen model of compassionate capitalism. A generation of young professionals entered the workforce expecting more than just a paycheck, expecting purpose, community, and the chance to be fully human at work. Thinking deep thoughts? Sarah's voice interrupted his reverie. David turned to find her standing beside him holding 2 cups of coffee. So much had changed, but some things remained constant. Their early morning meetings, their shared vision, their friendship forged in the crucible of transformation. "Just remembering," David said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "My mother used to say that we can't always choose what happens to us, but we can choose what we do with what happens to us," Sarah mused. "That night I was at my lowest, and you chose to help, and I chose to build on that help. And look what grew from those choices." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the morning shift arrive. People walked differently now, with purpose, with pride, with the knowledge that they were part of something meaningful. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd just driven past that night?" Sarah asked. "I don't think I could have," David said. "It wasn't really a choice. It was just who I am, who my mother raised me to be, who we all are, deep down, when we remember to be." As the anniversary celebration began inside, David took the stage one more time. The auditorium was packed with employees, partners, customers, and media. The story of the parking lot had become legend, told and retold in different ways, but always with the same message. Kindness is powerful. 5 years ago, he began, I learned something important. We spend so much time making business complicated. Strategies and metrics and competitive advantages. But at its core, business is just people serving people. And people serving people works best when we remember to be kind. The celebration continued late into the day. But as the sun set, David found himself back in the parking lot, this time with Sarah and both their mothers. The 4 of them stood, where it all began, surrounded by the invisible threads of connection that had spread from this spot to touch thousands of lives. "You know what I love most about this story?" Mrs. Chen said, her voice weak but warm. "It's not that kindness won. It's that kindness was already there, waiting to be recognized. You didn't create something new. You revealed something eternal. What would you have done that night in the parking lot? Would you have stopped? Would you have helped? The truth is, we all face parking lot moments every day. Moments when we can choose to walk past or stop to help. Moments when we can choose fear or choose kindness. Moments when we can choose to see others as competitors or as fellow humans just trying to make it through the rain. The kindness revolution starts with your next choice. What will you choose? Like this video. Subscribe to our channel. Share your own parking lot moment in the comments below. Because this channel is for those who believe that small acts can create big changes, who understand that we rise by lifting others. Welcome to the kindness revolution. It starts now. It starts with you.